And in this new image that I want to show you today, we may finally have one of the best smoking gun images showing these bases that we've spoken about being on the moon, that we've heard the astronauts speaking about, and that we have heard from former military and photographic techs that worked for NASA and admitted on record that they blurred these bases and structures out and erased them from existence before the photographs were fed to the public. So in this new image that we're showing you here, which is actually from Ken Johnston Sr.'s personal Apollo image archive, and Mr. Johnston is the civilian astronaut consultant pilot, and this was discovered by Brett Collins Shepard, and as we zoom in, this formation becomes clearer and clearer and begins to take on a more defined formation that definitely has characteristics of an artificial construct. Now, some have said that this may be an extraterrestrial base or some sort of lunar dish array. Now, we've shown you the images before of these massive satellite dish-looking objects that have been seen and are extremely famous when it comes to this research. They've been featured on multiple documentaries, videos. An image of these dishes you're seeing here.
The exosphere is the outermost layer of the Earth's atmosphere and is around 6,200 miles from the Earth's surface. Now, according to NASA, low Earth orbit is around 1,200 miles from the Earth's surface. So before I tell you the reasons why it is impossible for us to go beyond the exosphere, or for that matter, even past the thermosphere, have a listen to what some NASA experts have to say about this topic.
As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
Hang on. So, what you're saying is that in order to send humans through this region, we need to solve the challenge of getting through the Van Allen radiation belts. But I'm confused. Didn't you already solve this challenge back in 1969 when you sent astronauts to the moon and subsequently 5 other times after that?
But we're also really pushing the boundaries in terms of where we're going forward with exploration. I think humans are naturally driven to do this, and this is really the beginning, I think, of human beings leaving low Earth orbit. I certainly plan on being around to see that.
So she's a NASA astronaut, but I guess no one bothered to tell her about the first time that we left low Earth orbit. I guess she might be a little too young to remember. Here we have another astronaut that wasn't told about the moon landing 48 years ago.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today, and it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
So that would mean that Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins and Buzz Aldrin were a tough bunch of SOBs able to withstand all that brutal radiation, considering these challenges are still yet to be solved. So how is it that we had the technology to achieve this amazing feat back in 1969, but we're still working on the technology in 2017, almost half a century later? Well, I managed to find a very clever and well-informed astronaut that will totally straighten things out for us and explain exactly why we're not able to return to the moon and break through those Van Allen radiation belts. Have a listen to this clever chap.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
This guy, oh boy. Here's a real-life example of what can happen to you when you're exposed to all of that outer space radiation.
I said once to a reporter, how long must it take before I cease to be known as a spaceman? Why did you make that comment?
I guess we all like to be recognized not for one piece of fireworks, but for the ledger of our daily work.
Strolling around the Ohio farm where he was born, Armstrong is easy to talk to but hard to know. He can seem guarded, but above all, we were struck by his humility. You sometimes seem uncomfortable with your celebrity, that you'd rather not have all of this attention.
No, I just don't deserve it.
But look, how many people have walked on the moon? 12?
We're going to look at some images put out by NASA which allegedly show the remnants of the Apollo programs taken by Lunar Orbiter craft. In what year did you say, Andrew?
Well, what happened was in 2009 the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was launched. It had a high resolution camera, sort of better than the previous one, and I think the original mission for this was to look for new landing sites for the new moon mission program, which was announced some years earlier. Now it's all been scrapped, and we'll mention that again later. But so Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, everyone said, oh, we're going to get these new high resolution pictures of the moon. We're going to fly over the old landing sites. We'll be able to see the craft, and that'll, prove all these crazy conspiracy theorists, wrong. So these were images awaited with great fanfare, and finally, I think it was the 11th of August 2009. Sorry, 11th of September, I think it was actually when these came out. 2009. Yeah, it was an interesting date. Was it the 11th of November, or it's 9/11? It was 9/11 date anyway.
Yeah.
And what we see on NASA's website is the supposed picture of the Apollo 11 site. And the Apollo 11 Lunar Excursion Module, the LEM, is shown as basically a sort of reasonable sized white blob with 3 and a bit white blobs around it. And you can see this
sort of the feet.
The feet, exactly.
Right.
Feet of the actual, the landing part that they left on the moon. So basically with this,
And there's a scale on there.
There's a scale on
their image.
Correct, and they give you this figure of 200 meters. So when you look at the space between these dots, which is meant to be the feet, you know, of the Lunar Excursion Module's landing section, you can then work out how big this distance is, because they give you a scale. So this is what I did. I worked this out. So I found out the size of the distance between the feet, which is of the Lunar Module Excursion, Lunar Excursion Module, and it's 31 feet diagonally across.
Along the longer length, yeah. Okay.
Right. So if you plug that into the figures that NASA gives you for the size of this image, that Lunar Excursion Module landing section should fit into a space at 7 by 7 pixels on that image. 7 by 7 pixels. That's the figure you come out with. Or maybe it'd be 8 by 8, possibly 9 by 9 or something. You know, you could maybe slight margin of error, something around that figure. So when I actually measured what this alleged photograph shows, and I measured the distance across, it's basically a distance of about 28 pixels.
Right.
Which means
so it's a factor of 4 too big.
Roughly, between 3 and 4, depending on how you sort of turn the image and so forth.
Right.
But
so it's completely the wrong size.
Yeah.
The image
So it's the wrong size. It's the wrong size.
And we were talking about UFOs.
We were.
And
funnily enough,
let's say I brought out an image. I had someone on the show who was eulogising about an image. Hey,
let's say it was taken from a helicopter.
Yeah. Hey Richard, I was in my helicopter the other day and I filmed this UFO. It's phenomenal. Look at it. Look at the picture. And if they showed that, what would people say? Exactly.
If you showed that as an image of an alleged UFO that you took and you didn't have anybody else's photograph of it to back you up, would you believe that that was a metal object resting on the ground below you? Would you believe that that was a real photograph? Yeah. People will believe this because it's on NASA's website.
Yeah. Because NASA say that is the Apollo 11 craft, then people believe it is.
Yeah, exactly. But if you look at the quality of that image and you study this, I don't know whether this will come out on the video.
As you say, it's a white blob, Andrew. Could be anything.
Right. You know, and then you look at these other, and then what I tried to do is I tried to get an impression of what it should look like, and I managed to find, this isn't again a totally realistic image, because we see the lunar module in orbit rather than landed, but I tried to get an impression of what we should see on that LRO image. And
by resizing it,
to 7 by 7 pixel image, or 25 by 25 pixel image, which is the size I calculated it to be, and then I compared that with the NASA image, and there is, you know, it just doesn't add up.
If you compare it to Google Maps or Google Earth, which a lot of people are familiar with now, it's pathetic.
We do have a comparison with GeoEye. So why haven't we got, and there's none of these vertical grainy lines either. If you look at those LRO images, they've got these vertical lines in them for some reason, which I don't really understand what those are. So if you compare these two images,
why isn't it in colour for one?
Why isn't it in colour? Why, and the same goes with the images from Mars. Why are we still predominantly getting black and white images?
Well, we'll come on to Mars.
So but that, going back to that, so why have we got such rubbish images from LRO? The ones from GeoEye are pretty good. You know.
So the first one that they put out, allegedly of Apollo 11, it's just a white blob, and it's completely the wrong size. It's 4 times too big.
You see, the vibration of my voice box makes the air vibrate between us. Then when the air vibrates your eardrum, you hear what I'm saying. But maybe you've seen a demonstration of a bell under a glass jar. With normal air inside the jar, you could hear the bell clearly. But when the vacuum pump drew the air out of the jar, there was nothing inside to carry the vibrations of the bell. Nothing until the air was let back into the jar.
They can't get your photo numbers. And this is core tube number 2. Okay, just in fact, you're almost driving without a hammer. But if you'll hand it to me, I'll get it in a second. I'm going to take a couple more shots of this before we leave. Get all in, I get the pictures. All right? Driving in real easy, Houston.
The sounds in space, it's odd to have a hammer or a metal tool and bang it against something and hear absolutely nothing. You can, sound won't travel in a vacuum, so there you are outside and you could be hitting something, no sound at all.
In space, since there's no atmosphere, there's no air, if you bang on something while you're doing your spacewalk, you will not be able to hear that.
And this leads us to the dilemma of our final segment. All modern astronauts, such as Piers Sellers and Mike Massimino, claim to hear absolutely nothing when they're out on the International Space Station in the vacuum, banging away with metal tools and objects, whereas during the Apollo missions, all kinds of sounds have been recorded that should not be possible if they are on the moon in the vacuum of space.
Okay, just in fact, you're almost driving without a hammer. But if you'll hand it to me, I'll get it in a second. I'm going to take a couple more shots of this before we leave. Get all in, I get the pictures. All right? Driving in real easy, Houston.
That does not sound like the spacesuit acting like a drum at all. It sounds like a metal hammer striking a metal object repeatedly with authority. Pictured is Alan Bean during Apollo 12 striking a metal core tube into the so-called lunar surface with a metal hammer. This is an interview with Apollo astronauts Alan Bean and Pete Conrad done by the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal. They are once again taking the position that the sound is coming through the hand and transmitting into the microphones in the helmet. Alan Bean says, "I would have said it wasn't possible," and Pete Conrad responds, "The other guy can't hear it." If the sound is coming through Alan Bean's microphone, then like his voice, it must be transmitted directly into the headset of Pete Conrad, so his statement makes no sense. Alan Bean's statement makes a lot of sense, since it would not have been possible in a vacuum. When Bean says, "I would have said it wasn't possible," he has science on his side. And he also has NASA on his side, at least up until August 19th, 2011. And this brings us to the most important graphic in the film. This is a web page that has been disappeared from the internet by NASA as of August 2011. It was at nasa.gov, running concurrently with the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal between 2009 and September 2011. However, this page, which was created for children, you can see the banner at the top, Lunar Science for Kids. This page directly contradicts the assertions made in the Apollo Lunar Surface Journal concerning the hammering sounds in Apollo 12, 15, and 17. This page talks about the science involved with sound on the moon, and it does so correctly. And that is why NASA has disappeared it from the web. The contradiction between the journal and this page was brought up in the very popular Moonzoo forum, and that is where I first became aware of the situation. Reader Tom128 pointed out the contradiction between the Site for Children and the journal, and I went looking for the Site for Children and could not find it. I then went to my favorite research tool, the Wayback Machine at archive.org, and I was able to find an old version of the page that NASA did not clean up. And whenever I see information go missing from the web, it always starts me thinking, and this was the genesis of the film. At that moment, I became a NASA moon hoax researcher. You've seen the image on the right of the graphic before. That is Alan Bean hammering a core tube during Apollo 12, and this is the sound of such hammering. The graphic is problematic for NASA because of the contradiction to the journal, and the graphic is correct science. And I quote, "Sound needs something to travel through to get from one place to another. On the moon, since there is no air, sound cannot travel above the surface. So, there are no sounds on the surface of the moon. When the Apollo astronauts were out on the moon's surface, they could only talk to each other and to mission control by using the radios in their air-filled helmets. Even when the astronaut in the photo to the right hit a metal tube into the ground with a hammer, no sound was made." All of the sounds so far analyzed were made by the astronauts as they were handling tools, but now we are going to analyze some sounds that are made a distance away from the astronauts. So what you just saw appears to be a smoking gun. That scene, which was broadcast live to the world during Apollo 15, shows astronaut James Irwin. He takes this cord or band off of a canister, and those canisters are in the MESA table, which Irwin is standing in front of. He unravels the cord, which has two metallic locks at the end of it, pictured here. They look like bullets. He takes that off, he unravels it, he reaches back with his right hand, and he throws the cord away. Let's take another look at it. So the argument has been made for the hammering that the sound is coming through the glove and it's miraculously getting into the microphones. But we don't have to deal with that argument because James Irwin releases the object and it hits the ship and he's not touching it, and that sound is picked up by the microphone inside the astronaut's helmet. And you can always tell that that's the microphone in play because you will always hear the sound of the suit air supply system in the background whenever the astronaut is transmitting, and you will hear this sound remain on for a split second after the astronaut stops transmitting.
Yeah, you better believe it. Yeah, you better believe it.
Both the outside of the ship and the inside of the ship in the cabin are in the vacuum because the lunar module does not have an air hatch. So when the astronauts leave the lunar module, it is depressurized. Microphones in the lunar module plug into the audio centers. The only voice possibilities are through the use of the headsets. They took off with 6 microphones, 3 Snoopy caps. Each astronaut also had a lightweight headset at launch. While they were on the moon and the suspect audio event took place, they were wearing their Snoopy caps. Communication cables, which are the umbilical cords that the astronauts plugged into while in the lunar module, as you can see from the checklist, were stowed prior to EVA. Also, looking at the same exact checklist, we can see that the lightweight headsets were also stowed prior to EVA. So, there were no live microphones inside the cabin.
I don't want to put it. There you go. Wait a minute. It's all right, I got you reaching for the flag. How's that? That's very good, Gene. Let me get it in stereo. Houston, that's beautiful. This has got to be one of the most proud moments of my life, I guarantee you. Let's get a close-in one and we'll trade cameras. Houston, I don't know how many of you are aware of this, but this flag has flown in the smoker since Apollo 11. We very proudly deploy it on the moon to stay for as long as it can in honor of all those people who have worked so hard to put us here and put every other crew here and to make the country, United States, and mankind something different than it was.